This week on Tome Travelers, we jump across the pond into Germany's fantasy powerhouse with The Dark Eye. Aventuria is a vast and detailed continent and a world in need of heroes. The heart of Aventuria is the Midden Realm, an empire nominally ruled by the young Empress Rohaja, but in reality controlled by powerful regional lords and ladies. It is a land where knights and daring heroes fight for the order of the gods, and grim dwarves delve their mines in subterranean cities deep in the mountains. The Dark Eye derives its name from the most intriguing magical artifacts in Aventuria, the Dark Eyes. These rare and powerful magical items allow users to view faraway places and glimpse scenes from the distant past. Creating such an artifact calls for very powerful magic and a sizable quantity of raw meteoritic iron. Few spellcasters have ever mastered the necessary enchantments. When completed successfully, the iron assumes the form of an orb or an eye.
Well, hey, there we go.
That was lengthy.
That is pretty lengthy, and I'm very impressed that you got that meteoritic.
Meteoritic. I was like, oh no, this is going to be awful.
Just as complete sideways, if they're following German pronunciation, it would be Rohaya.
Rohaya.
I am very small percent German.
I took 2.5 years of German, and I don't remember any of it.
Well, doing better than me, and I remember... Well, we'll get around to that anyway, but we're not really here to talk about German per se, technically. Welcome to Tome Travelers, and I am your host, John, and I am here with...
Roxy.
And Sam.
And we actually are joined today by...
I'm John Hambone McGuire from the Vintage RPG Podcast.
John, thank you so much for coming on the show with us. This, to me, is like it's a good thing because... It's kind of like the role-playing game history genre itself is becoming a thing recently. And I love y'all's podcast. Y'all started up not that long ago, right?
Right. Stu has been doing the Vintage RPG Instagram now for a couple years. We just rolled out the podcast a couple months ago. And I'm having a blast. Like you, I love learning about the history of RPGs.
There are so many people doing it now. So, I mean, like on Twitter, there is
the
Law Dog. And he does little shout-outs all the time about RPG history. And, of course, there's another podcast that's called System Mastery, but they do their own thing. System Mastery specifically looks for the worst RPGs they can find and review from history. It's not about reviewing the big ones. It's about finding those really bad stinkers.
It's more entertainment.
Yeah. But y'all, as far as the RPGs go, you seem to track down specific rare books and look at them review. And y'all usually do a lead-in about games y'all are playing.
Right. What we like to do is, we're not just playing classic RPGs, and a lot of times we're not playing those RPGs. Stu is a collector first. Mm-hmm. He's a collector as well as a dungeon master, as a game master. He does a little bit of everything. He is a man who likes collecting. So Vintage RPG rolled out of Stu's love of collecting, and also in a lot of ways trying to curate the classics that are kind of just tossed to the wayside, the things people have long forgotten about. So I would say not everything he covers is awesome. There are plenty of stinkers. There are plenty of stinkers out there. Yeah. There are plenty of things that I didn't think would ever exist on our realm. For instance, he recently got the Dallas role-playing game. You remember the TV show Dallas?
No.
Who Shot JR?
Oh wow!
Oh, no!
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, and there's a reason why not many people have heard of it.
Yeah.
So.
He's got the only copy now.
See if he's heard of High School, the role-playing game.
Oh,
there was actually a High School the RPG. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were making it funny because I was going to say high school didn't really work out so good for me. So,
but no, they actually had one. It was the artist was someone who did work in Deities and Demigods. He did all the illustrations for the Cthulhu gods.
Interesting.
And it's really bizarre. And it only came out for a short time, and then boom, it was gone. So
I mean, I went to high school with a lot of people that look like pseudopods and stuff like that. So
slimy.
That's right.
Goodness, maybe this missed its time period because last year was a year of all the children and high school games. I mean, you had so many that hit, like Tales from the Loop hit last year. Lights Out hit last year. A few others hit last year. Masks. Masks is also kind of that teenage, youth RPG. Mm-hmm. But other things, it's kind of weird, parallel. But John is also a musician. How would you describe your band?
So I play in an outlaw country band. It's a bunch of old punk rock kids who now play outlaw country. It's a band called Secret Country, and I play the bass.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
Yeah, so Roxy's...
I haven't gotten John into outlaw country yet, but he used to be a punk rocker, so...
Yeah, I played in a band that was punk and ska back in the 90s. And so
fun.
That was my world for a while and everything else. And
My heart goes out to
Yeah,
you.
the world back then was having to take at least 2 vehicles to a gig, because if you had a ska band, you had at least 7 people in that band.
yeah. That's right. And Sam fiddled with the violin.
Ugh, I wish.
Fiddled with the fiddle?
Yeah, for like 2 weeks, and then they moved away, so
Oh, well.
it made me sad.
But so this week we are diving into the RPG
Yes.
of the Dark
Eye, which...
Yeah.
I've looked at this a little bit when you first got because you backed this on Kickstarter,
Yeah,
correct?
I did. Oh.
And I remember looking at it a couple years ago, I think while you were at Gen Con, or maybe right when you got back from Gen Con. But I remember looking at it trying to build a character, and I think I petered out when I got really confused about some of the stuff
Well, you
in,
were
the,
just,
in the system.
You were just getting into RPGs
And I was pretty
time.
new to RPGs. This was not a starter.
Oh no.
This was not a starter book.
It's a point buy system, but we'll get it all into that really in this moment. But
Yeah.
So the Dark Eye released in 1984, and it is a German role playing game. So again, a lot of Northern European games coming over recently. Tales from the Loop is a Northern European game. Trudvang.
Okay.
You know, all these are big games from overseas that kind of hit a little popularity recently. But so, as always, we try to time our games to what happened in that time period, give people a little bit of background. So, 1984, the Bell Company split into 8 separate companies via region in America. In Texas, we have the Southwestern Bell, and you have the Southwestern Bell Yellow Pages, and that happened that year. It feels like it would have been longer ago to me.
Southwestern, no, I mean, that's 30 years ago.
This feels like it wasn't that long ago. I mean, what about you, John? I mean, you're in South Carolina, or where are you?
I'm in northern New Jersey, actually.
Okay, my bad.
Wow, you're way
I'm way off.
He doesn't
Yeah.
do well with state
we-
abbreviations.
No, it's okay. We do emanate somewhere from the swamps of New Jersey when we do record our podcast. So I do love the state of New Jersey. I've been here my whole life.
Awesome.
I did tour, so as a traveling musician, I did see this amazing country in a lot of different places.
Mm-hmm.
However, my heart is always state of New Jersey.
Yeah, that's how I feel, because I'm not a Texan by nature.
No, she's
I
not.
moved here for him, and I'm ready to depart with haste as soon as I possibly can. I'm a Midwesterner, but we had Southwestern Bell too in
Okay.
northern Missouri. So Southwestern was a broad region.
Yeah,
It
obviously
was a broad
so.
swath of the United States. So, and 84 was a good year for me. I entered the world.
Yeah, that
In
was
84,
That was the
so,
year you were born.
Yeah.
See, 1984 was great because I'm almost 40 years old. So 1984, I was 5,
Okay.
and that cartoons. It was a golden age of cartoons and
Yeah.
80s movies for me growing up. I mean, I was seeing everything when it was happening. One of the first movies I saw in the theater the year before was Return of the Jedi with my mom. So
Awesome.
this is it's a pretty cool time, the early 80s.
Oh man. Yeah. TV was there were a lot of big things that hit TV that year. Night Court premiered. I don't know if anybody ever.
I used
Did
to
you ever
watch
watch
Oh, yeah.
Night
I
Court?
used to watch Night
My
Court.
mom hated it.
Really?
Yeah. Only because of Dan Larroquette's character.
He
Because
was a
he's really
skeeve.
sleazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mom, this was after the divorce, so mom hated men just all over the place. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate it. But no, I liked it. Harry
Anderson? Did
Harry,
he just die?
he died a couple months ago, which is very
Beep,
unfortunate.
beep, Britchie.
That year was
It.
also the Bloopers and Practical Jokes premiered on TV, which has been remade and redone in different ways since then.
Dick Clark and Ed McMahon. We used to watch that too.
The infamous commercial, "Where's the Beef?" I don't know.
Where's the beef?
Where's the Beef? Which has become kind of a...
I've only seen that in like flash, like in montages of yesteryear. I've never actually seen that actual ad.
Oh, if you would, do so, because it's really creepy, actually. It's like these 3 old ladies at a counter, and there's just like this dark, shadowy background. Anywhere you look, there's a single light shining down. It is really kind of creepy.
But it was a series, and they got the same lady to do it over and over again. And she actually ended up doing like a movie and reprising the character in it, saying, "Where's the something for..." Yeah.
Ah, the 80s.
Yeah.
What a time.
What a time to be alive.
I don't know how topical this is, but Hulk Hogan became the heavyweight champion of the WWF, defeating the Iron Sheik that year.
I was just watching a video on YouTube that mentioned this match.
Uh-huh.
And it's probably not PG-13 why they mentioned the match, but they kept talking about the Iron Sheik having a little bit of an arousal issue during this match, and I was like, are they just being stupid? Nope, there's photographic evidence. There's something going on there. I will never look at the Iron Sheik the same ever in my life. It was yeah. So we may have to cut that out for PG-13, but I thought it was very interesting that came up in a YouTube video yesterday, and you had it as a talking point for this.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where Hulk Hogan is a pop culture icon.
Oh, he is.
I mean, wrestling icon, yeah, but you have his horrible movies such as Suburban Commando.
Hey, shh.
You know,
I love that movie. I saw it on Summer Movie Club like 4 times because we saw the same movies every year.
You guys are really sad. Just to let you know.
But reality TV.
You live with us, remember that?
Yeah, that's
wrestling, just cameos. I mean, he is almost, or was for about 20, 30 years, the face of professional wrestling.
Did you watch wrestling, John, when you were younger?
I love professional wrestling. I grew up watching professional wrestling. I kind of got out of it in my later high school years. As of, I'd say, 2012, I kind of deeply got back into it.
Really?
I just went to Chicago for All In.
Awesome.
The biggest independent show ever to hit America in probably easily 30 years. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, Hogan was the thing. Back in the 80s, his films, barring his films and how horrible they were, I mean, he was a walking, living, breathing god.
Yeah, he could do anything and make money off of it. I mean, there was nothing he couldn't.
He couldn't make movies. He should have got a better agent for that. But other than that, man, he was it.
That's right. That's right. No, he was a big part of my childhood. Watched a lot of wrestling growing up because it was on WCW had a Saturday morning. I don't know if it was a rerun or if it was just a Saturday morning program, but I would watch that because it came on right after my cartoons. So it was either that or we also had horror movies that played on one of the other channels, and I would switch back and forth depending on how bad the horror movie was. Because I was pretty young. I shouldn't have been watching that stuff. But watched a lot of wrestling, and Hulk Hogan was a major player in my childhood.
But also music that year. So you had John Lennon's Nobody Told Me was released posthumously.
I know, you say that interesting. I don't know if you say it right or wrong. You say it different than I do.
John, I don't know how many Texans you know, and I suffer from this. In Texas, we say every word about 10 different ways. It's terrible. It is absolutely terrible. It's true. And you talk to a Texan, and it's like there's a road down the street from us called Kirkendall, but that's not how it's spelled. It's you can get in a conversation, and people will say it about 6-7 different ways during the course of a conversation. But anyway, so John Lennon's song though was released, which I think was actually the same year. It was released as a single, while Yoko Ono also released an album that her and John recorded together. So she released that posthumously, but it did not do well.
Yeah.
Now, while that's going on, Paul McCartney and his wife Linda are arrested for possession in Barbados.
See, do you say Barbados or Barbados?
Barbados.
Barbados.
Okay,
Barbados.
Well, there we go.
I went over this with you twice before we went on air, and you
Dirty laundry.
You're still
dirty
saying
laundry,
Barbados.
Kids. We're airing dirty laundry.
I know. It just
keep it for the bedroom.
Yep.
Well, listen. You know what? In fairness, I appreciate this because if you've listened to the podcast, you can tell I'm very terrible at pronunciation, especially of fantasy and role-playing creatures and locations. So, hats off to you, man.
Oh, thanks. Van Halen, that year, best-selling album, 1984, with the songs Jump, Panama, and Hot for Teacher.
Yep.
I remember all of those.
I remember the music video for Jump. I mean, obviously years later, because it used to play on MTV a lot, and my parents kept MTV on. I think they got tired of Sesame Street for a while, and so they just switched over to MTV, and they were like, sit and learn music and watch MTV. So I have a lot of really bizarre memories of MTV from a very young age.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I do apologize.
No, I said that's such a cool thing.
Yeah, my dad was a classic rocker, so he was like, okay, I'm tired of of the C is for cookie song. Let's get something else going on in here. So.
Wow. But yes, MTV, back when it actually played videos.
Played music videos.
And that was it.
Yep.
Oh.
Good music videos, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Other things. That was also, and we've talked about her a couple times on Tome Travelers.
Yeah.
I mean, she just pops up in history all the time, but that was Madonna's first TV appearance on American Bandstand.
And the world was never the same.
Hey.
Or at least America wasn't the same.
Like it or hate it, she was a big part of music history.
For sure. She had some good stuff.
Yeah. No, she had some great stuff, and I'm not a big fan of her newer stuff. I think it was her James Bond song that she did. I think it was everything after that I haven't been a big fan of. But before that, I really liked her stuff. But so, finishing up this thing, movies of 1984. We had Beverly Hills Cop, Ghostbusters,
Yep.
Gremlins, Police Academy, and Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. So, you're shaking your head over there.
Well, Gremlins, when it came out,
So
we
good.
were living in Pennsylvania, I think, at the time. And I begged my dad, please let me go see it. Please let me go see it. My dad's like, all right. So we went there, and I'm sure you've seen the movie, John.
Oh, yeah, Gremlins is one of my all-time favorite
Yeah.
movies. It's a Christmas movie, and let's
Yes.
not
It
forget.
is. It's one of the
It's
better.
good any time of the year. I think I got my parents to take me to see that one because I was like, look, it's the Ewoks again. They weren't Ewoks.
Man. Well, yeah, see, I did the same. I begged my parents, and I got as far as the water spill scene. I ran out of there screaming.
Really?
At that, like crying, and I just sat in the lobby while Dad and whoever it was watching, and I never saw it again until like I was a teen. And I was like, man, I was scared of that. Well, I was young. I was 11. Yeah, I was 11. Wow. Then
Listen, if it actually makes you feel any better, I used to get very scared at horror movies. I love horror movies now, not the torture porn movies with like the Saw movies. I like classic horror movies, 80s horror movies. So when I was younger, one of the things that they used to do in New Jersey was have movie theater birthday parties.
Oh,
One of my
wow.
childhood friends rented out a movie theater in Clifton, which is the town I grew up in, and it was called the Allwood Theater. And he rented out a theater, and he got Tremors, and I was 12, over 13 at the time, maybe a little younger. It's hard to remember. Here's what was also out at the same time: The Little Mermaid. Now, we went to see Tremors. I got the pants scared off of me by Tremors. I had to leave the movie, and I ducked into The Little Mermaid, and I watched that instead. So the very first time I saw The Little Mermaid, I was supposed to be watching Tremors.
That's awesome. A lot of those movies are well, I'm not going to say a lot of them. I don't think I've ever seen Beverly Hills Cop all the way through.
I have never seen it.
Axel, what was his last name?
I want to say Axel Murphy.
Foley.
Oh,
Foley.
Axel.
Foley.
Thank
Yeah, that's
you.
I
right.
was say Eddie Murphy was the actor,
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm thinking.
and I've never seen any of the original series Star Trek movies ever. I've only seen Next Generation and the reboots.
It is
I
a
don't know what to say.
truism. It is a truism that the even numbered movies are the best, are the good ones.
And so
The odd number ones are the ones that have been panned. The second one, Wrath of Khan, is by far considered the best,
you're right.
out of all of them.
Now,
so.
is the Search for Spock when they save the whales, or is that the fourth one?
No, that's the
No,
fourth
that's
one.
the fourth one.
That's
and
the
that
fourth
one's
one.
better than the Search for Spock?
Yes, Search for Spock is kind of
Really?
lame. They had Christopher Lloyd as a Klingon. I mean, where can you go from there?
No,
And John Larroquette, he played a Klingon too. Bizarre.
That's all right. But Ghostbusters was a huge part of my childhood.
it's
My
a huge
parents,
part of
it
everybody's
wasn't.
Mine
childhood.
too.
I watched it all the time as a child. You know, I'd just rewind the tape and put it back on. That was another thing that my parents let me do. I didn't watch it for years. Like, after maybe a teenager, I didn't watch it until my late 20s again. And I watched it, and I was like, there's some stuff in this movie that I probably should not have been seeing as a child. But I realized, kids really just don't pick up on stuff. They're just right over the head. But
Yeah.
but
One of the first games for my Commodore 64, you may have, no, not John, may have had one, was Ghostbusters. It was a Ghostbusters game, and it was terrible. But it was mine, so it was great.
that's right.
Well, moving on now, we have dated this game and ourselves.
Yes.
The Dark Eye. And this is kind of a boast, but it might be a fair one, and that is that the Dark Eye is, to me, Europe's equivalent to the universe and game of Dungeons and Dragons. And it's a heck of a boast. I will be honest, because Dungeons and Dragons here in the United States is huge.
It's huge.
Movies, video games, novels, comics, 30, 40 years of history. You cannot avoid it. It's in the movie E.T. They're sitting around playing it at a table.
Were they?
Yeah.
Is that what they're doing at the beginning?
Yes, at the beginning. They're playing first edition D&D.
You know the only reason I remember that scene? This is also me as a child. Is because one of them calls the other one a douchebag, and my mom was like, "You better never say that word." And that's about. I didn't remember what they're doing.
Man.
And,
Yeah, this is my childhood.
and here we are decades later in Stranger Things and Dungeons and Dragons all
playing
over
D&D,
again. It is now entering into the realm, as of this podcast, as of this month, that it is going to become a competitive online sport.
That looks. I still am like, I don't even know what to expect from that. But
I know.
Good for them.
Yeah. To even try to compare the Dark Eye to it might be a little bit boastful. But I think that there's a case to be built. And so that maybe I'll try over the course of this show to try and build that. So people might actually look into it, to be honest. So it was created by Ulrich Kaisau and launched by Schmidt Spiel. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure Spiel is the German word for game.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. And this was a German publishing company. Ulrich Kaisau had been the translator for Tunnels and Trolls and other D&D products into German, and he was the writer of the majority of the lore dealing with this world until 1997 when he passed. About 10, almost 15 years that he was involved in this property. And I'm not really as familiar with his contributions to the game. But at the same time, it was a really good launch. It had this professional kind of quality to it. So he launched it with himself.
Mm-hmm.
It involved a board gaming company that also helped him out with it, providing a lot of the artwork, a lot of the work on it.
What was that Schmidt Spiel?
The board gaming company, I'm trying to remember who they were. It was a name. It was three names. It was three names that I will not try to even pronounce because I will butcher it horribly.
That's fine. That's fine.
It was a publishing company as well as a private editing company that all got involved in this game to release it. And I don't think that in the 80s, until Dungeons & Dragons got picked up by White Wolf, that it really had that level of professionalism behind it. Or not White Wolf, picked up by Wizards of the Coast.
Okay.
Have there been many, John, since you're kind of the expert on older games, have there been any other older games that have come over? Or is this is Dark Eye pretty much the first major one?
I think it is one of the major ones that has come over that is that old. I think that, right now, we're in a kind of what I've called many times a gaming renaissance right this moment, where tons of games are getting released, some of them original and some of them older, like Tor. Tor just re-released, or Torg. Torg just re-released, and it was a big game in the 80s. And it released to huge fanfare, which is involved in this property, actually. But I think it started off in the United States. Now, you have that where it was so popular overseas, and the writer of this, actually in that time frame, released 3 games. It was 3 editions.
Okay.
So Dungeons & Dragons, it had the first edition, second edition, and advanced. So it's kind of in that same time frame.
Are second edition and AD&D separate properties?
I consider them such myself. But a lot of people say
I only ever hear people say...
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I hear people say AD&D second edition.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a second edition of it as well?
My understanding, somebody can
know.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was, Dungeons & Dragons released, everybody called it first edition.
Mm-hmm.
Then it jumped forward, and you had, I think it was second edition, and then Advanced came out of second edition. I think Advanced was trying to fix the rules that, needed a little bit of more work.
Okay.
What do you say, John?
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was the second edition branding of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. So they're one and the same. That's what I was wondering.
It does get confusing because but they're book publishers, so in the end of the day they're going to try to keep you just a little bit unbalanced so you keep having to buy the products.
Yeah.
So the second edition anyone who I knew who played it when I was younger called it Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or they would just call it D&D, and that was it.
Same
Yeah.
here. Same here.
When you got into things like 3rd edition, rebranded again just as Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
After those editions came out and Chrysaud passed away, the property was transferred to what was at that time the editing company, and by the parent company. The publishing company basically said, "Okay, we're giving it over to the editing company because he had actually helped found it. He actually helped found this editing company and everything else, and we're going to let you run with it." And that company is known as Fantasy Productions. Now, we know it here in the United States as FanPro. Now, FanPro was a big name in the U.S., releasing some games that had been bought out by Topps. These properties
We
transfer
talked about
everywhere.
BattleTech.
Yeah, BattleTech, Shadowrun. These were the titles that we know here in the United States. But FanPro is who translated FASA games into German. So the FASA games coming out of the United States went overseas, and FanPro released them there under that. Which, oh my goodness, when we get into the concept of games overseas that are released by singular companies, releasing material from here in the U.S., it is amazing. This company, FanPro, shut down. It started off it started off pretty strong, brought these games over. I actually enjoyed Shadowrun quite a bit, and it had a great community online. I think it was Osterchek ran the online community for Shadowrun, and there was some great material released. And he actually left Shadowrun to go work for Alpha Omega, running their
That poor fellow.
Yeah, but he went from Shadowrun and running their online community to going to Alpha Omega to run their online community. To me, I kind of feel like that was a really strong time for Shadowrun.
And they were being produced by FanPro at that time? Is
Yeah.
that what you're tie-in? Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting how all that kind of runs together. Because I think it was last show we actually did Alpha Omega.
Yeah. And it was a mess. So, I don't know how I feel about Alpha Omega.
Well, yeah, because people can go back and listen to that show. We'll try to avoid discussing that.
Did you play Shadowrun or BattleTech?
No, I did not. To give you guys a little more about my RPG history, I came to RPGs later in life. I spent a majority of my teens and early 20s into my early 30s touring and playing in different bands. So I didn't really have a lot of exposure to RPG games because we were always on the go. And to be very honest with you, at that point in my life, RPG games had a very different stigma around them.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So I'm in my late teens, early 20s. I'm trying to be in a punk rock band and a rock and roll band. The idea of playing an RPG, like I've actually had girls that I were dating at the time threaten to break up with me because they were afraid that if I went and played Dungeons and Dragons with my friends and their friends found out she was dating a nerd, it would be game over.
Oh, I was expecting like a devil worshiper because that's what I grew up with.
I don't know.
I think that would have been easier for her to explain or spin to her friends, but no, it was always. Listen, I may look like a tattooed bad boy, but I have a heart of gold, guys.
That's right.
It's all kayfabe here.
That's right.
The thing about D&D was I came to it when I was about 25, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It was, I think, the one thing I imagined was really missing from my life. Mm-hmm. So over the last bunch of years, I spent a lot of time playing D&D, but I've expanded into other kind of role-playing games, especially since we've been doing the Vintage RPG podcast. Mm-hmm. A lot of cool independent companies are really coming out with really cool RPGs that are either left of center or things that you would never think of before.
For sure.
So a lot of the stuff that you're all talking about, a lot of the stuff that was big outside of Dungeons and Dragons, I had just never heard of up until maybe 10 years ago. And so I'm just kind of relearning everything as I go, and it's a really nice experience for me because, when you're like, oh man, you meet someone like they've never seen Star Wars, like how could you have never seen Star Wars? I turn that around and say, oh, you've never seen Star Wars? Let me show you something cool. And that's the way I feel about role-playing games because I've been with a lot of cool people who say, oh, you've never played this? Oh, my goodness, I get to break you in. Let's do this together. And I think that's cool. So, I appreciate what you all do on your podcast as well because I'm also learning about things that this game is crazy to me.
Yeah.
I never would. It's awesome.
Yeah, that was what really was the birth of our show was I didn't get into gaming outside of board gaming until I met John in 2015, and so he's been my entire RPG introduction. And now him and Sam being on this show, they get to tell me all the stuff that I've had no idea existed.
That's how we boost our self-confidence.
That's right.
We know more than you do. Ha ha.
That's awesome.
Getting back on the topic
for sure,
of this,
for sure.
so it now left FanPro, because FanPro, from 2000 to 2010, was this kind of, for me, a dark period in role-playing, because we saw 3rd edition to 3.5 really didn't have that much of an impact on the market, but when 3.5 went to 4th edition and the OGL was shut down, and the opportunity to continue to publish for those previous games, expansions, whatever, all of a sudden just dropped off the face of the map. And a lot of companies like AEG left their role-playing market and went fully into board games. They just said, forget it, we're done, we're going into this.
Right.
Mongoose left behind their contributions and went big time into Traveler. All these different companies just went. And FanPro, I really feel like they got kind of hit and sidelined with all this, and we're leaving the U.S. market and going back to our central market where we are doing the best business and everything else.
Yeah, it looks like that was a good call for them based on the list of titles that they release.
Yeah. So FanPro now still exists overseas, but they have actually gone into publishing books. And so I went and looked them up, and authors and titles I have no background or knowledge of. It's all German fantasy essentially.
It's all European.
Now the property is held by Ulysses Spiel, which is now a powerhouse in the game industry in the last few years. I actually was at Gen Con 49, and I was there.
We didn't make it to any of their panels the last 2 Gen Cons, but
that first year they actually got set up in the Paizo booth area. Paizo will ever so often allow other game companies, especially smaller game companies, to come in and sit down and show their stuff to their customers, which I think is awesome. Ulysses Spiel. I mean, let's go down the list of titles that they are now releasing.
Yeah.
In the U.S., Dark Eye, Fading Suns, Torg, Wrath and Glory, the Warhammer 40k RPG, which is the role-playing game version of the Warhammer 40k tabletop battle game.
Right.
And it's also become the repository for Dark Heresy, Death Watch, Rogue Trader, and many more. I mean, that is a whole lot of games here in the U.S. that have really good backgrounds, because those games came out of Black Library, and that company basically sent all its RPGs to other people.
Well, wasn't we talked about them before, right? We talked about them
Dark
on
Heresy.
Dark Heresy.
We talked about them. In Germany, they release, and this is crazy to me, because this is how these companies all come together is amazing. In Germany, they release BattleTech, Pathfinder, War Machines, Hordes, the World of Darkness books, Earth Dawn, and Infinity.
And I thought Infinity was already under a European publisher. I thought Infinity was
it's a French publisher.
Oh,
it's Corvus something.
Oh, then I was just misinformed.
And we'll get around to French role-playing games eventually, because that's a whole other market.
That is a lot of games that it is. They are, and ones that, I didn't realize that Paizo didn't handle Pathfinder overseas. I kind of thought that they were I know they're the end-all be-all for Pathfinder, but the fact that in at least Germany, they are releasing Pathfinder, Ulysses Spiel. So that's pretty cool. That's a big license to have.
Yeah, and it really is not unusual. Like even here on essentially this same hemisphere in South America, Spanish-speaking nations, you would think translation would be fairly easy. It's very common for United States companies to hand the publishing over to other companies, even in South America. And so, I see, different authors and different publishers all the time saying, hey, this company is going to be releasing our game here in Chile or in Brazil. And it's like, wow.
I see, okay.
But
Modiphius does release some Infinity stuff, by the way. But it's still English, it's not in German, so that would be the primary difference.
Yep. But so that's essentially the history leading us up to this point with this property.
Yeah, because you were back to Kickstarter for it from Ulysses Spiel North America.
Yeah.
In 2016.
Oh goodness, I don't even remember when that one started.
I guess I have the book in front of me. I could look at it for a date. But.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and looking at the physical property itself. I mean, this is
Yeah.
gorgeous book.
I wish we had a PDF to send you, John, so you could look at it, unless you have one. But I don't know.
I do not. I've just been trying to look at the images on the old Google machine.
Yeah, and I did send you the link for the Kickstarter, which has some of the images on it.
I did check that out as well. It's awesome.
It's a very cool looking book. I will say
it's
that.
beautiful.
When you first brought it home, I was like, this is kind of neat.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a hardbound book.
Look at that dwarven noble.
Yeah.
Their dwarves look so, normal. They don't
Well-
have weird, like, exaggerated features like you kind of are used to in fantasy things.
Well, it reminds me of the dwarf in Dragon Age 3 that works in the castle.
The dwarf that works in the
Remember
castle.
the female dwarf that like is an armor or whatever?
Oh, Dagna?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it kind of reminds me of that.
I'm a dwarf fan.
She is.
I don't like elves. I like dwarves. So
But so hardbound book. The cover, I believe, is embossed, which has become a part of the.
it's got varnish on it.
Well, it's
is what
got
we call
varnish,
that.
but you can actually feel like
Yeah,
the
that's the
changes
varnish.
changes in texture.
It's the varnish.
I love that. Roxy has actually worked in major publications for different companies, not that aren't even part of the gaming.
Not gaming industry, unfortunately, but
She's now doing layout for gaming industry.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's just a really pretty book, well laid out.
you seen it yet?
High quality. It is, I think, in the ballpark of 400 pages.
Yeah, I'm at. Yep, it's just over 400.
Yeah, 416 pages, full illustration and color. It's a gorgeous book.
Mm-hmm. It's full color. It's laid out nicely. We've had some books on here that are laid out ridiculously. Hard to read, hard to follow, but this one, they've got, it looks like every class and every race they have a picture for, which is not always the case in when you have so many different classes, because they do have quite a few classes in this text.
And
the races, if I remember correctly, the races weren't so much like elves, dwarves, etc. It's more like they are different from different areas
yeah,
of the particular world. So instead of like human, elf, dwarf, it's like American, German, Russian kind of.
Mhm.
It's a very poor comparison, but
It's kind of like, at least in what I think of like a Middle Earth, which I know there are elves and dwarves and humans and there are distinct races, but they almost seem like dwarves are always like Celts, they're always either Irish or Scottish, and it's like England on a very different scale. It's like, well, and this part of the country will be this race, and this part of the country is this race, and they have the accents to go with it. And so that's kind of what it feels like.
it would be interesting to see how that whole thing got started.
I think.
Do you think?
Please.
I was going to say, I appreciate what you guys are saying because I've been checking out the art. I appreciate that, especially with some of the creatures. It's not like a one-size-fits-all style of creature that, in any kind of role-playing game, it's like, oh, an orc is an orc is an orc. Like, I love that there's some differences and some more texture and more background ideas of these characters. Now, what I was going to say is that, you said the thing with the Scottish dwarf. Do you think it was one thing where, all right, the guy did the Scottish accent one time as a dwarf, and that's everyone's go-to now. And that's it.
Probably is the case, because I do, I watched a lot of the RPG shows now where they have like the voice actors on them, and they're always pulling Scottish accents for dwarves. I'm like, why? Why is this? But it has to. Somebody did it once, and now that's just the thing.
Well, it may also have to do with, dwarves kind of come from Europe. There's like all kinds of different dwarvish myths.
Well, that could be too.
But like Leprechaun is associated with Ireland, and so whenever you see it, what do? They have the accented, so which may not be accurate, but well, what can you do?
I've been to Ireland. I've never once seen a leprechaun, so that is incorrect.
That is a fallacy. They are not real. They do not live there.
At the same time, this is one of those things where we get into the idea of, is it a race or is it a culture? And that's like, I think it's Seventh Seas, previous edition, not the current edition, but the previous edition really dealt with that idea of your nationality and your culture as a racial trait. Mm-hmm. And I think this book kind of blends both, where you have your nationality is racial in traits. Like, there is a part of your culture that changes who you are with
or
a lot of
influences
emphasis.
you.
Yeah.
Influences you in a very real way.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where we're so central here in America. I don't know how else to put it, but it's like we all have this identity based on our media and everything else that we see ourselves one way. Mm-hmm. But you can go state to state, city to city, and find different cultures.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I just can't get over this book, because really, I was thrilled when I saw this. It is well laid out, again, thoughtful, good art, and for a launch property, I'm excited for this one.
And, like, one thing that I noticed as a woman coming to a table and coming to a book, like this witch here, she's not, I mean, she's busty, but she's not scantily clad. Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned Dragon Age earlier. The witch in Dragon Age, Morrigan,
yeah.
She wears almost nothing. so I don't know if you're a big video gamer, John. I play Dragon Age and Mass Effect are my two big ones, but always scantily clad witches.
They get cold very quickly.
And then I guess they use spells to whisk it away.
Right. Yeah, I don't really play a lot of video games. I'm more strictly board games and role-playing games. That being said, I 100% am with you on this. It's like, really? A chainmail bikini? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But all of the women...
What's the AC on that?
That's right. That's right. All of the women in this book are wearing functional clothing, and that's what is also kind of interesting, because I don't know if that's a cultural thing with American books versus maybe European books. I don't know
how much sex sells.
Yeah, and I would assume it would sell well everywhere, but they seem to have taken, and maybe there's more women involved in the production of this book as well, but even like the thief and stuff, they're all wearing nice clothes that don't seem out of place, and she's in full plate mail. So it's kind of nice to see compared to some of the other books that we've looked at, some of the older books, because it has gotten a little better in the last 10 years or so.
Oh, yeah.
But some of the older books that we look at, we've seen some art that I'm like, ooh,
well, definitely.
Well, not going to let a kid play that one.
Well, it's like we were looking at Rapture, which is this Christian horror game that has...
I don't know if I'd call it a Christian horror. It's an end times RPG, but yeah, it's a
with
mess.
A heck of a lot of S&M in it.
Yeah. Oh.
Looking at the mechanics of this game, so like I said, he came out of Tunnels and Trolls, which was kind of a D&D clone.
Okay. See, I'd never heard of Tunnels and Trolls. It sounds like a play off of Chutes and Ladders.
Yeah. Well, Tunnels and Trolls, Swords and Sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons. It's
I see,
that
okay.
kind of,
Tunnels and Trolls. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Offices and management.
Yep.
Terms and conditions.
Yeah.
But, so looking at the game, the way it worked, as opposed to what we're used to, like in Dungeons & Dragons, we're used to strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, and charisma. I'm glad I remembered all those. Their stats in the original game were courage, wisdom, charisma, agility, and strength. And so the way you created your character with your stats was rolling a d6 and adding a modifier. I think it was based on your race. The idea was, and that sounds kind of weird, but the idea was when you were playing your character, you were rolling under the number. You were trying to roll under it, not trying to exceed it, which is what Dungeons & Dragons usually does. So you roll your d20, and it's like if you have an AC 13, you're trying to get higher than that. This game does it backwards, which I think you would like, because that's...
Because I roll low.
You roll low, and it's like the 2d20 system is your baby.
Yeah, no, I like...
You like rolling under.
Yeah, I prefer the rolling under thing as opposed to the rolling over, because, I don't know, it's just a personal thing.
Because you're a loser.
Wow.
Now, in the original game, though, so, I mean, there's two different ways of looking at this game. The original also had classes, but their classes were Adventurer, Warrior, Dwarf, Elf, and Mage.
So their class was their racial trait also. So,
yeah.
Except for human. No human. Or were warriors considered humans? I'm so confused.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those weird things of, why?
Well, in the original Dungeons and Dragons, that's what it was. Like, the dwarves were fighter thieves, and that was it.
Interesting.
Elves, I think, were mages or fighter mages.
Huh? Ponzi. No.
I have no idea what that is.
Ponzi.
Oh, Ponzi,
yeah.
like a
Their
British
noses are
poof.
up in the air.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
You watch enough British stuff.
Not
Ponzi.
that. I've heard poof, but not Ponzi.
Oh.
But don't slander me and my knowledge. But no, yeah, the race was also the class. It was assigned.
Interesting.
And it wasn't until, and you may correct me on this, John. It It wasn't until AD&D Second Edition, I believe, where they were actually separated.
Interesting.
Was that it? Am I
See, I came
correct me?
along in the second edition. Greyhawk was where I came into Dungeons and Dragons, so I was already far behind with most people. At least from those hardcore old school gamers.
Did you remember, John?
No, I recall playing first edition. I mean, because I went back and I did revisit all the editions.
Started all at the beginning. Good for you.
Yeah, it's for better or worse. No, I recall in first edition being able to pick a race in the class together. Yeah, in first edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, well maybe I'm totally.
You're wrong.
I was just.
It's been a long time.
My brain melted. I have no idea.
I'm more familiar with the history than the rules, so. But that's how this game started for their first 3 editions. Mm-hmm. When they got picked up with Fan Pro and then Ulysses Spiel, with their 4th and 5th edition, it became a point-buy system, which is what you tried to make a character in and what I've made a character in.
I don't know why I'm awful at point-buy systems.
Yeah.
Just tell me how many points.
Which point-buy system is similar to Shadowrun or the Hero system.
Hero system, my personal favorite.
And I kind of like that because you were no longer pinned into a specific thing. It was not, you will play this race, you will play this class, and you cannot do anything else. I'm so glad that they kind of left that behind and they said, you can design your own class. You can build your own skills. You can have magic and yet be a warrior. Mm-hmm. I find that to be much more organic in the way that you play. And so you're looking through, 4th edition, the way they did it, you had hundreds and hundreds of options. 5th edition, they kind of limited that a little bit, tried to narrow it.
We're talking about Shadowrun or?
We're talking about
D&D.
Dark Eye.
Oh, Dark Eye.
Yeah, we're talking about Dark Eye.
Oh, I didn't realize it had 5 editions.
Yeah, so it had 4th and 5th edition.
Oh, you did say there were 3. Yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right.
But the 4th edition, like I said, had hundreds of possibilities. 5th edition, they tried to narrow the scope a little bit, and I really kind of feel like it's a great game.
Okay, so we're on the 5th edition.
Yeah,
now.
we're on
That's
the 5th edition,
have.
which is the book that we have.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's the one that came out here in the United States. A lot of people aren't familiar with the game itself. But like I said, I ran into them at Gen Con 49. Now, John, you went to Gen Con this year, right?
Yeah, I've actually gone to the last few Gen Cons. It's one of the things I've always kind of wanted to do, and then once I went, I had such a fun time. I've been going. That's my vacation every year. I don't go places with beaches. I go to Indianapolis.
Hey, it's all right. It's been sweltering the last couple years there, so it's close enough.
But so did you run into them at Gen Con?
I didn't. My Gen Con experience is a little different because the first couple times I went, I really didn't understand what was going on and how things were done. Mm-hmm. It's a whole brave new world when you get there. Whereas, the last couple of years as I've been going, I've had a blast because I knew how to register for everything right ahead of time. I knew, where to sign up for stuff. I knew, what I was looking for. And this is one of those things that, as a guy who does play a lot of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, mm-hmm. I was looking for games that were outside of the scope of a somewhat, I don't want to say traditional style RPG, but something that's a little different than I play every week.
Right,
yeah,
for sure.
Like this last year, I specifically went to go play. There's a game that we're actually doing an actual play for called the Ninja Crusade. I go to Gen Con so I can have somebody run it for me rather than being the person that always runs it.
Oh, cool.
Ulysses Spiel, I got to see them 2 years ago when they had launched their Kickstarter, but they were at Gen Con.
It might have been 3 years ago now.
Was it 3? Okay, so 3 years ago.
Because I've been twice with you.
Okay, so
and
3 years.
It was the year you went without me. Yeah.
Yeah. They had their booth in the Paizo set up, and then they had, I think it was on Sunday, the last day of Gen Con, which is when everybody's always trying to make deals, so they don't have to
carry
cart
all their
stuff
back.
everything all back, or mail it and spend a fortune. And I actually, ended up buying their book.
You got a ton of stuff that year. I remember now. Yeah, you brought home.
And they had
free stuff too.
Yeah, and they had CDs because when they do adventures, they put out a CD of theme music and it's a theme for every scene. So a CD has like 20 different themes on
mm-hmm.
it, which I love because I collect soundtracks. It's one of those things I do. I was like, so what are would you sell me the sound? Would you sell me the CD? And the guy's like, yeah, I'll sell it to you. And there's actually, I'll have to play it for Sam and see if he can translate any of it. But there's a German folk song on it with people singing along to it.
Okay, the last time I took a German class was in '88.
I was going to say, he said he only took like 2 classes of German. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I know enough to say it's actually Spiel, but that's it.
Well, John, we can just get Duolingo, and
Yeah.
and once you learned how to say the cat sits on the chair 5 different ways in German, I'm sure you'll be able to translate that folk song.
Okay. But they did their Kickstarter. They've done 2 Kickstarters now. They did one for their core rule book, which I followed a little bit. But I actually didn't back it on the original Kickstarter because I bought it at the con.
Okay.
I actually backed on their second Kickstarter, which was
all
for
their other
the
stuff.
Aventuria Almanac and a whole bunch of other stuff. I love it. So I backed them on Kickstarter, and I really didn't back that high. I didn't. But they end up sending me a box full of they sent me their Almanac, they sent me their bestiary, they sent me a whole bunch of posters and maps and coasters and stickers. And
I feel like we have decks of cards, too, don't we?
yeah. I mean, they sent me so much stuff that...
And dice?
Yeah.
We have the dice cup.
Yeah. But, like, so much of it was free. They just, like, were this, like, so happy to have people backing and loving their
Now,
games.
did you mention that it's a color-coded dice system?
No, I haven't yet, because we've just kind of started talking about that. Yeah.
Because that's the thing that I don't think I understood when I was building my character, and then when we got the dice, and we have, I think, 8 colored D20s to go with it.
Yeah, so imagine you're playing this game. Now, combat still runs on the same way that I described the first few editions, where you're trying to roll under with a D20. Now, when you're doing your skill tests, though, I have never known anyone that does something like this. No other game I can think of acknowledges that not every skill or not every test that you are doing is done the same way. Like when you were striking someone with a sword, I mean, this is using just a rough example. This doesn't really apply in the game. But when you're striking someone with a sword, imagine that sometimes you're just using brute strength. You're just hitting with as much strength as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're just dexterous and you're using you're that quick.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it is more of a knowledge thing. Maybe you're not strong and maybe you're not quick, but it is ingrained into your mind when to hit or how to strike. Every test that you're running into in the Dark Eye has 3 dice that you roll per your stats, and it actually tells you. And you're usually, if you get 1 success, it's like you passed minimally. But if 2 of your attributes pass, you actually are doing much better. And it builds on this concept that every action you do can be done in a myriad of ways. And so
I was gonna say, it looks like here the question is, are you rolling 1 d20 or 3 d20?
Yeah.
And so for attribute checks and any kind of attack or defense roll, it's just 1.
Mm-hmm.
But all your skill checks are 3, and then there's this whole thing in here. It's kind of it's neat the way that they've done it in the book, and I've seen other books do this as well, where it says colored dice according to Paramanthus, who is an Aventurian researcher. So it's got this tie-in to the lore of the setting that this researcher has determined that there is a connection between colors and your skills or your attributes. So that's why they have a color chart for your sagacity is purple and your intuition is green and charisma is black. And so that's where
so that way you know which dice is which.
Yeah, that's where the 8 colors of D20 come in.
Yeah. And if you actually start looking through the skills section here, you'll actually see it'll give you like a skill check. Thing is, it'll tell you what dice colors to roll in the write-up of the skill.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so I just love that. I think it's so cool that
it's definitely unique.
Definitely unique, and brings more of a narrative element into it, because maybe you were trying to do something, but you weren't using that one skill. I mean, if you're trying to cross a rope over a chasm, you might be trying to cross it with balance, your dexterity, or maybe you're just holding on for dear life with your strength.
There, actually, in D&D, Pathfinder, excuse me, there were actually a lot of feats that allowed you to do that. It's like there was one where you could use dexterity instead of strength to strike. But it was like nimble, I think. But there was kind of something similar, but it wasn't like melded together like that is. Right. It was like you could either have this or that. And
that's how we run a lot of our more cinematic games.
Yeah.
Is there's not a defined check. Mm-hmm. It's as a storyteller GM, you always ask the character, what are you doing and how are you trying to do it? So then you've built roles off of that for whether it's Ninja Crusade or Seven Seas or any of them. There's not like a defined...
Yeah.
I know working on some of these dungeons for 5th edition and Pathfinder, it lists out this is the check they have to pass. You know, the check is given to you in the adventure, whereas some of these more narrative style games, which I guess Dark Eye can do that.
This is somewhere in between because it's telling you what is used for the check, but it's giving you a myriad of ways that you can succeed.
Okay, interesting.
And so I've never known any other game that does that.
Have you ever played a game like that, John?
I have. And it's definitely interesting because there is a lot to be said about trying to dance along that line where you have creative freedom and you're doing things cinematically and also still trying to play within the letter of the law when it comes to the rules. I do like to leave a lot of things up to DM discretion. Or GM discretion, because it really does come down to, owning the time that you share with your players and knowing that your time and their time is absolutely as precious as possible. So you want to make sure everyone gets the most bang for their buck.
For sure.
So, I do like rule sets like this, and I do like the concepts that they're throwing out here that you're all talking about with this book, because it's kind of fun when you have the ability to kind of like look at something and it changes the idea and the scope of how you might consider running a game. And then maybe open you up to an idea that you're like, I never would have thought of that, but now this is pretty neat, and give it a run like that. One of the things I love most about RPGs is it genuinely is not one size fits all.
Yeah.
There's there's always plenty of ceiling in a well-made game.
Right, and that's one of the things, because I've never ran a game, but working on these mini dungeons that I do, I read a lot of modules, and one thing that I know I've enjoyed from good GMs, or the GMs that I consider the good GMs, are the ones that have the module and they know what they're trying to accomplish, but they also know their players well enough to go, you know what, somebody can do this a little different, and they're open to accepting suggestions and the like from players who say, I want to do it this way. My character would do it this way, not necessarily just a straight perception check, but they have keen smelling or something. They would change something and make it theirs. And I think this kind of a system really allows for the GM to have a little bit more playroom on how to accomplish a goal and not keep them necessarily within a defined module.
Right. I think it's a cool idea, because there is a certain relationship that a GM and their players should have together, where while the player's trying to get their stuff in and get that hero moment out of it, the GM is also able to tell the story that they want to tell and keep things going in a way where the game doesn't break and nobody has fun.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you guys are doing a great job at selling me on the systems. So keep talking.
Well, I made the boast at the beginning that this would be comparable to D&D in the United States. And so if I'm going to close this up on, would be discussing really quick, what else has this game done? And so out of the Dark Eye, it has spawned 17 video games. I believe 9 of them are available under different titles in the United States on Steam.
Wow.
It has 8 mobile phone-based games. It has several fiction novel lines. It has its own trading card game line. And it also has multiple board games, which I actually have a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have that. Now, the adventure modules are released overseas. They have not been in the United States yet with the soundtracks. They've released them here, but the soundtracks are almost strictly German.
I know I
overseas.
can't read any of the titles on the soundtrack we have.
Yeah, and that's too bad. But it's tabletop audio. Trying to bring over audio, like here in the United States, you have Sirenscape. You have what's the one that I usually use?
You use DMDJ.
Yeah, I
but
use
they're
DMDJ.
They're pretty much defunct, but the app still works.
App still works, and it's still for sale. But there's already so much of a market here already for soundtracks and sounds to run your games. I think that's probably the main reason you don't really see it here.
Yeah.
And so that is essentially the Dark Eye property. Looking at this, what are y'all's final verdicts? I mean, what do you think, and would you play this game?
I think I would definitely play it. It's just trying to fit it in with everything else that we're playing right now. But it's definitely cool, and I think I've been trying to figure out, I was like, why did I not finish my character when I was creating it? I think I was trying to be too ambitious, and I was like creating my own class. Because there is a lot of rules in there I was creating a priest of something or something, and I can't remember what it was, but they didn't have that example in the book. but they had all these other priests, and I think I bit off more. I should have just picked one of the ones that was already in there, and I could have finished it, but I think I just got a bit too big for my britches on that, and it was way too early in my in my gaming career. But it seems pretty cool. I like it. It reminds me of a lot of things.
Sam, what are your thoughts?
Being someone who's rather hidebound to certain systems, I would find it very difficult to
break out of it,
wrap my brain around different colored dice, etc. I mean, it's definitely unique. But I mean, it would, like, if it was something that someone's like, "Hey, let's do this over the weekend." All right, cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to it, but
we'd provide you with different colored dice.
Yeah.
And really, I think the only thing about
Throw
the
'em at me.
different colored dice is because you're rolling 3 attributes, they don't want people to fudge
yeah.
what they're. Oh well, I rolled a 17 on my charisma. That's not my, my strength or whatever.
It fell on
know.
the carpet. Really, that's what it says.
That's what it says.
John, what are your thoughts?
I would definitely give it a shot. I think that as much as I do love 5th edition, I do run into a lot of people who might not be thrilled with 5th edition and also might not have had the best experience with Pathfinder back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So having the option to bring something new to everybody might be a pretty fun idea. And also the thing with the colored dice, everyone I know who plays RPGs have a sick amount of dice, and they don't want to admit to you their dice problem. I fully say I love dice. I will buy dice any chance I can. So if they do not have the dice, I surely can provide the multicolored dice.
For sure. Yeah, that's why our other show is called Dice Foyers.
Yeah, we check out other people's dice.
I think what I do appreciate about your podcast is that you do give a really good unbiased look at this game, and you really did a great job at selling me on it. So I'm definitely going to check it out.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll keep up with you on social media, and maybe we'll see you playing it someday.
Yeah. Just wrapping up on my thoughts really quick.
Okay.
So I do like the Dark Eye, and I like a company that really went above and beyond on their Kickstarter to give me something special. All the stuff they sent me, that really says to me that they kind of value me, and it's nice to feel that, especially with Kickstarters.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, going to Gen Con and talking to the guys that ran this, one of the things that they said is the Dungeons and Dragons is based upon the lore within Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and we all know that. I mean, originally it was called the Middle Earth. No, it wasn't Middle Earth.
It was Tolkien.
They said so. You're playing a game in Dungeons and Dragons that's based upon Tolkien's work, which is further based upon the legends of Europe. They're like, this game is based out of German and German folklore. So you were getting a German game from a German company that's writing about the folklore that they are familiar with directly. And I was like, that's an interesting way to think of it and put it. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And everything I've read, and I've even bought one of their novels and read it, I have really enjoyed this world and the way that they present themselves and this game. Mm-hmm. And so, no, it is a game I definitely plan on running, and it's just finding a way to fit it in. But I just think that it is such an intriguing and refreshing thing.
For sure.
Because, John, do you remember the first time you really got into a role-playing game? And when you were kind of fresh and kind of stumbling and coming into it, I mean, what were your thoughts?
I was very lucky because the guys that I started playing with, Stu was one of the people I started playing with. They were just so excited to bring a new guy into Dungeons and Dragons and actually be playing again, because a lot of these guys I started playing with hadn't been playing D&D for a long time. So, I was very lucky that I got guided into it. I know a lot of people have bad first experiences when they step into it, and it really does behoove. It's almost a responsibility of a dungeon master, a game master, a keeper of secrets to really take initiative to make sure that everyone's comfortable at the gaming table and that everyone's first experience is a great one, because this is something we want everyone to be involved with.
Mm-hmm.
And, for most people, I think that it's that first great experience that makes us fall in love with role-playing games.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I want. I really can't have that first time all over again with Dungeons & Dragons, really. I've had it with Dungeons & Dragons. I played my first character. I still remember stories of my first time to role play when I was a kid. And I kind of remember things about my character. It's like, oh, I remember this and I remember this. but I can't really have that per se all over again. But in a new system and in a new world where I'm learning all over again, this is it. And that's what I want. And so it's a new experience and nostalgia playing off each other that really drives me to want to play this game.
I was going to point out on their website, Ulysses Spiel or Ulysses North America, they do have adventures, pre-made adventures for sale and available.
And I do have their adventures. They just don't have the CDs.
Oh, that's what you said. They don't have the CDs. I thought you were saying they didn't have adventures. I was like, well, there's like 6.
No, they have the adventures, and I actually have majority of them.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, they don't sell the CDs in the United States, which I wonder if might also be a part of the licensing issue.
That could be too.
So that is pretty much the show for the evening. John, thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful to meet you and get to know you with this.
Well, thank you guys very much for having me. I really do appreciate you guys sharing a little time with me tonight and inviting me on your show, and I definitely look forward to more episodes in the future.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
This was this week's edition of Tome Travelers. Remember to check us out on Patreon, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere that you can go. We're probably out there, but PassionNerdly.com is where you can always find us. And that is our show for tonight. We'll see you guys later.
All right. Night, guys.
You've been listening to Tome Travelers. Please subscribe to get our episodes as soon as they release. For more information about us, check out PassionNerdly.com, at PassionNerdly on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Facebook.com/PassionNerdly. Also, if you're interested in supporting our show, look us up at Patreon.com/PassionNerdly. Once again, thank you for listening.
This has been a production of the Southgate Media Group. For more podcasts like this one, head over to SouthgateMediaGroup.com.